Obviously, metal music is the coolest, and metal guitar work is the most brutal and awesome. But do you ever stop to consider what things make metal guitar work so much cooler and heavier than guitar work in other music? Chugging and chunking are two really important techniques that greatly contribute to the heaviness of metal. The origin of the term chunking likely stems from the onomatopoeic nature of the sound produced by strumming blunt, heavy sounds out on the guitar. And you could probably say the same for chugging. See, you're listening to your favorite silver vixen and maverick metal music maven Geneviève Genepi, and today we shall be having a chit-chat about the specifics of this tiddly-widdly guitar technique and its associated techniques. Thus my click-clack, cluck-cluck intro. Well, we've already established at this point that I'm a wee bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, being a bit cuckoo-cachoo and all. So chop chop, let's go and check out some chugga chugging. Choo-choo. So, what is chugging in rock and metal music? A most basic definition would sound something like, guitar chugging is a rhythmic technique often used in rock, metal, and punk music, where the guitarist plays palm-muted, heavily accented, repetitive, low-pitched notes or power chords in a steady, pulsating manner. It creates a driving, percussive sound that adds energy and intensity to the music. Oh, I almost cracked up at the end there. Gotta love a good basic definition, though. However, unless you're a guitar guy or guitar girl, hey yo, then that might not mean that much to you. And even if it does, I obviously aspire to go deeper. So, let's go. One of the words I just threw out there is palm muting. Since we're all metalheads and we all worship axe music, I'm betting we all know what that is, but let's pretend for a second there's like one person in the room who doesn't. Palm muting refers to the technique of resting the side of the picking hand on the strings of the guitar near the bridge of the guitar, so where the strings go into the body of the guitar, while playing, resulting in a muted and percussive sound. Palm muting is actually a fundamental component of chugging. You really can't get that chug if the strings are ringing out, so necessarily you gotta palm mute a bit. The origins of palm muting can be traced back to early blues and rock and roll guitarists from the 1950s. I know, I'm like a broken record every week. Hear me out though. The rock and roll guitarists of the 50s, they were out to try and emulate the sound of the double bass, so the big cello thing as tall as a small woman, and they were also trying to emulate percussion instruments. By lightly muting the strings with the palm while playing, guitarists were able to achieve a rhythmic thump reminiscent of a drum beat. This technique became especially prevalent with the advent of amplified electric guitars, as players found that palm muting could help control the sustain and volume of their instruments in a band context. To tangent our tangent, in context of guitar amplifiers, sustain refers to the length of time a note or chord maintains its volume and intensity after being played. A guitar amplifier's ability to produce sustain is influenced by a couple different factors, including the amplifier's design, because you get what you pay for, the type of tubes or transistors used in its circuitry, and the settings of its controls, obviously. Turn this twisty, gobble that knobbly. When a note is played on a guitar, the amplifier amplifies the signal, boosting its volume. Clearly, have you heard an electric guitar when it's not plugged in? And sending it through the speaker or speakers. Sustain occurs when the note continues to resonate and decay. That's such a meta way of defining it. Decay. Gradually over time, rather than quickly fading away. This prolonged resonance adds richness and depth to the sound, allowing guitarists to create expressive singing tones with long, sustained notes or chords. Certain amplifier designs, such as those with high gain stages or specialized circuitry, are optimized to enhance sustain. Additionally, effects pedals, such as compressors and sustain pedals, can be used to further extend and enhance sustain by compressing the dynamic range of the guitar signal and boosting its amplitude. But that's hardware nonsense we don't need to consider any further. There have to be some guitar podcasts out there getting into that. Let them go on some wild tangents about that. I think that's good enough for at least we need to know. In short, palm muting is colored very much by the hardware, and to a real extent even developed because of the hardware changes in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But ultimately, it's its own technique. I'll try not to run through the same original gods as I did in previous episodes, so check out You Really Got Me by the Kinks for a classic, old-school example of palm muting. Over time, palm muting evolved into a versatile tool for guitarists across various genres. In rock music, it became a staple technique for creating dynamic contrasts within songs, allowing guitarists to switch seamlessly between clean and sustained notes and muted percussive rhythms. Without the heavier effects used in metal music, it really makes a contrast between sustain and percussive. In metal, however, palm muting takes on a more aggressive and ruthless character, serving as the foundation for the fast-paced riffing and, most importantly for our one-sided conversation here today, for chugging and chunking. In metal, however, palm muting takes on a more aggressive and ruthless character, serving as the foundation for fast-paced riffing and, most importantly for our one-sided conversation here today, chugging and chunking. Of course, I have a few tasty examples for songs where palm muting is used without necessarily being chugging, although you could probably fight me on that in each example. Please don't. Be kind. The Pot by Choo is very bass driven, but there's some definite articulations from the guitar at the end of the verses, which are clearly palm muting, without necessarily being chugging or any other technique. It's a good example of palm muting as a technique used without building it into a chug or a chunk, just to give you a taste for that flavor. Its simplicity pairs very well with the bass and overall simplicity of the song. I really do enjoy the urgency and simmering frustration and anger of the song too. Who are you indeed? That the drums are so wild and primeval too really makes this one such a banger. It's a total vibe. Speaking of drums and percussion, if you pay attention to the breakdown, you'll notice that the guitar is doing some palm muting, keeping up with the drums. Very rhythmic, not entirely chugging or chunking, but very intense, very driven. Overall, definitely think this is an excellent song to check out if you want to have a little meditation on palm muting as a technique. Also, this gets me out of my thrash and post-thrash rut, since at least now I'm naming a progressive metal band. I was starting to wonder if I was just a thrash head at heart, but no, I still enjoy other metal. Phew. Another example of palm muting, also fortunately from a non-thrash band, would be Reminiscence by Avenged Sevenfold, traditional heavy metal. Well, I think they've had progressive metal and metalcore thrown at them, also American New Wave, but let's just say like metal for now, shall we? It serves my purpose, anyways. If you listen to Reminiscence, especially at the verses, you'll hear the guitar strumming but not ringing out. Tiny little palm muting. Actually, once I got into Waking the Fallen, the Avenged Sevenfold album that Reminiscence, the song, is from, I really noticed a couple nice examples of palm muting that didn't fit into any rhythmic style. I'd point to Eternal Rest as another example with that nifty riff. It's very rhythmic, to be sure, and the drums play off it pretty well, but I feel like you could say that it's more a melodic riff than a rhythmic one. Overall, I really enjoyed revisiting the album, though. I have to admit, I find it a little proggy. Not in a bad way, necessarily. It's very smart, but there were a few riffs that were so delicious, you just kind of wish they'd come back and rub up on them a little bit more a la metalcore. Though, then I guess you end up with Hail to the King, and then they get accused of being radio rock. There's no winning. Anyways, overall, Waking the Fallen, great album, several good examples of palm muting, a very clever, intelligent guitar playing, and definitely not too glossy. A nice, proper metal album. From 2003. It's legal drinking age. I'm scandalized. I don't understand how more than 2 decades have passed just like that. And I'm older than this album. Gasp! It really actually took a little work for me to really find a few examples where you could really hear the palm muting without it being used stylistically as chugging or chunking. I'm sure now that this episode is out, though, every song I hear is going to have it. It's one of those things when you stop looking, you find it. You know, when you can't think of that word in a conversation, no matter how hard you try, you go home, you get in the shower, and just as you're contemplating mundane niceties that have to do with tea, pillows, bedtime, and other innocent, trifling, capricious nonsense, and you start rinsing off the shampoo and suds in your eyes, and bang! There's the word. Anyways, I'm basically going to be haunted by stylistic palm muting for the next 3 to 6 weeks. No big deal. So, part of the big reason I wanted to toddle off, perhaps not that much, but still toddle off, and define palm muting separate from chugging and from chunking, but shh, we aren't there yet, is because while palm muting is necessary for chugging, not all palm muting need necessarily be chugging or chunking. It's wildly common to find the two together, or else to find palm muting used in other stylistic embellishments and techniques, some of which we will get into, but overall, palm muting is the 0-1, the basic primary color building block from which chugging and chunking are derived. Moving on, let's look at chugging. Chugging, above all else, drives rhythm. Riff-driven rhythms refer to the utilization of guitar riffs as the primary driving force behind the rhythmic structure of a song. To further nerdify the conversation, a riff is a short, repeated musical phrase or motif, often played on the guitar, that serves as a central element of a composition or a song. Riff-driven rhythms emphasize the interplay between guitar riffs and other instruments, such as bass and drums, to create a cohesive and dynamic musical experience. I feel like I'm fighting myself even as I go through my own bullet points. I'm like, yes, but bass and drums. Not the point. Chugging, then, is used to create riffs, rhythmic ones at that. It's a steady, pulsating, percussive repetition of the sound, the rhythm, if you would. Rhythmic riffing is characterized by its emphasis on groove and timing, as well as its ability to propel the music forward and create a sense of momentum. So, a couple examples of rhythmic riffing that are not necessarily chugging or chunking. A good standby is Bleed by Chugga. The guitar rings out, no palm muting, and it's really not chugging since the bass and the drums are doing a lot of the rhythm, but you're still getting something rhythmic and driven from the guitars. It's a very precise rhythmic assault. It's tight, it's calculated. The song features a hypnotic and polyrhythmic guitar riff, we're going to come back to that, I promise, that propels the track with its relentless intensity. I do recommend, again, Bleed by Chugga. Another nifty example is Gojira's The Heaviest Matter of the Universe. It really highlights their blend of groove and technical precision. That's definitely chugging. There's definitely chugging, but I'd argue that the verses lean more to rhythmic riffing that isn't wholly chugging. You also have to love how the song features dynamic rhythmic riffing that alternates between crushing heaviness and intricate complexity. Definitely a display of the technical prowess one would expect of a prog metal band. Also, have a listen to Obfuscation by Between the Buried and Me. It's a different vibe. It is a sprawling, nearly 10-minute epic that incorporates elements of progressive metal, death metal, and jazz fusion. It's a special one. The song features a diverse range of rhythmic riffing with lightning-fast passages to intricate grooves. There's some inventive use of polyrhythms and odd time signatures, too, which add depth and complexity to the track. It definitely showcases, all in one song, albeit a tank beast of a song, different ways rhythm can be generated with the guitar. My last suggestion, and this is more of a heart choice, but I think it's a good one nonetheless, is The Mirror's Truth by In Flames. The song features dynamic rhythmic patterns that transition seamlessly between driving intensity and melodic hooks. It's very high energy, but that catchy intro, which then gets pulled in to build the verses, really showcases how a riff can be rhythmic and really create some drive in a song. The origins of rhythmic riffing can be traced back to the early days of rock and roll, when guitarists like Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley introduced catchy, repetitive riffs that became the foundation of countless classic songs. These early pioneers of rock guitar relied on simple yet effective rhythmic patterns to drive their music and engage audiences. Of course, we touched on that in a previous episode or two, so we won't run through that again, but suffice it to say, rhythmic riffing is an old classic move. As rock music evolved into harder, heavier genres like blues and heavy metal, rhythmic riffing took on a whole new level of intensity and complexity. Bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath introduced heavier, more aggressive guitar riffs. In the 1980s, the rise of thrash metal brought aggression, speed, and intensity to rhythmic riffing. Thrash metal's emphasis on rhythm and groove paved the way for the development of other subgenres like groove metal and nu metal, which continued to explore the possibilities of rhythmic riffing in new and innovative ways. Now, if you're new here, you should definitely go back to the earlier episodes and have a listen. That was the recap, but there's definitely more information in previous episodes that would be worth getting into. That said, we must move ahead, because bullet points. The 90s! Pez dispensers, pugs, and visor hats. When did those even disappear? Not that I'm complaining, I just wonder. Anyways, as the 1990s unfolded, guitar chugging continued to evolve and diversify. The rise of bands like Pantera and Tool introduced new elements to the chugging technique, incorporating complex rhythms and unconventional chord progressions. These bands demonstrated that chugging could be both heavy and dynamic, showcasing its versatility across different musical styles. The turn of the millennium brought further innovation to guitar chugging, with bands experimenting with extended range guitars and down-tuned tunings, Groups like Korn and Deftones embraced 7-string guitars and dropped tunings, allowing for even heavier and more aggressive chugging patterns. This era also saw the emergence of djent, a subgenre of progressive metal, characterized by syncopated chugging rhythms and intricate polyrhythms. Bands like Meshuggah and Periphery pushed the boundaries of technicality and precision, ushering in this new era of chugging innovation. So, new definition time. I promised, we're at it. Polyrhythm. I dropped it first with Meshuggah a while back, but we skated on past because we were busy finishing up our rhythmic riffing tangent. So here we are. A polyrhythm is a musical rhythm that involves the simultaneous combination of 2 or more different rhythmic patterns or meters. In other words, it's when more than one rhythm is played or heard simultaneously, creating a complex and layered rhythmic texture. One of the most common types of polyrhythms is the 3-2 polyrhythm, where one rhythm is played in groups of 3 beats, while another rhythm is played in groups of 2 beats simultaneously. This creates a cross-rhythmic effect where the rhythms interlock and create a sense of tension and movement. Polyrhythms can also involve more complex rhythmic relationships, such as 4-3, 5-4, or even 7-5, where one rhythm is divided into 4 beats, while the other is divided into 3, 5, or 7 beats, respectively, and so on. They're intricate, beautiful, and jarring and intense. One example of this that I'm personally super fond of is Royal Beggars by Architects. It's a standout track that showcases polyrhythmic riffing so well. Released in 2018 as part of their album Holy Hell, this song really exemplifies Architects' ability to blend technical precision with emotional depth, creating a powerful and dynamic listening experience. The interplay between guitars, bass, and drums is tight and precise, adding depth and texture to the music. Architects demonstrate a mastery of dynamic in Royal Beggars, seamlessly transitioning between subdued verses and explosive choruses. This dynamic contrast enhances the impact of the song's emotional peaks and valleys, and it really sucks you in. The other innovative aspect of Royal Beggars is the incorporation of unconventional time signatures and rhythmic patterns. The song experiments with shifting meters and polyrhythms, creating a sense of unpredictability and tension that adds an extra layer of complexity to the music. It's this rhythmic sophistication that make this song a great example of polyrhythms and rhythmic riffing in general. Of course, the kings of polyrhythm are Meshuggah. Bleed is a great example, but so is New Millennium Cyanide Christ. In this song, they lean on the juxtaposition of different rhythmic patterns played simultaneously. The song features a relentless barrage of complex rhythms. One notable polyrhythmic section occurs around the middle of the song, where the band shifts into a mesmerizing groove that alternates between 7/8 and 4/4 time signatures. This rhythmic interplay creates like a sense of tension and unease, as the listener is constantly pulled between different rhythmic pulses. And despite its complexity, Meshuggah's execution is precise and calculated, showcasing their mastery of polyrhythmic composition. Quick reminder that if you want to listen to all the songs I'm noting, and by gosh you should, you can check out the Chatty Metalhead playlist on Spotify. You can find it on my Spotify profile. My Spotify is under Genevieve Genepi, that's Genevieve, Genepi. Call me Jen. Does it sound like I might have said that a few thousand times before I met you? I wonder why. Have a listen and leave a follow so you can check out the weekly playlist I put together to reflect the episode of each week. So, now that we've run a tangent on our tangent of a tangent, let's get back to the basics. Chugging. In the first definition of the thing, I noted that chugging uses low notes or power chords. Low notes would obviously mean the lower bassier notes of the guitar, which obviously makes guitars with extra lower strings or downtuned strings very interesting if one is looking to create depth with their chugging. However, beyond just using lower notes, typically one also uses power chords. Power chords are simple chord shapes, typically consisting of a root note and its fifth, and chugging with power chords involves playing these chords in a repetitive and rhythmic manner, often with heavy distortion, obviously. That sounded so technical and guitar-y, didn't it? I know, right? It's not as complicated as it sounds. Power chords typically involve playing 2 or 3 notes, so only 2 or 3 strings. Typically, the strings would be the lower strings, so in standard tuning, power chords are commonly played with the root note on the low E string, the 6th string. the A string, the fifth string, or the D string, the fourth string, with the fifth note of the chord located either 2 frets, that's the little finger placement slots of the guitar neck, either 2 frets higher on the same string for 2-note power chords, or on the adjacent string 2 frets lower for 3-note power chords. Not so crazy, right? Basically, keep it low, keep it simple. That said, power chords can be made to be a bit more complicated if played with different fingerings and configurations, depending on the guitarist's preference and the musical context. And technical ability, let's be honest here. Some guitarists may choose to play power chords with the root note on a higher string, or they may incorporate additional notes or embellishments to create variations of the same basic power chord shape. Ultimately, the goal of a power chord is to create a strong, full-bodied sound with minimal harmonic complexity, making them versatile and adaptable to various playing styles and musical genres. Power chords are called power chords because they possess a strong and powerful sound, making them well-suited for driving and energizing music, particularly in rock, punk, and metal. This powerful sound is primarily attributed to the harmonic structure of the chord and its simplicity, since again, it only includes 2 or 3 notes. Because power chords omit the third note found in traditional major or minor chords, they lack a distinct major or minor quality. Instead, they produce a very neutral and ambiguous sound that's not really major or minor. Really helps create that neutral rhythm sound, right? The omission of the third note in a power chord also eliminates the dissonance that can arise from major or minor chords, resulting in a clean, stable sound that resonates really well, particularly when played with distortion or overdriven guitar tones. This clean and powerful sound allows power chords to cut through dense mixes, making them ideal for creating heavy, aggressive, and impactful music, like metal. So basically, because there are fewer notes, they ring together better, and so they do well in the heavy makeup of the distortion or overdrive and still come out sounding very sexy. All told, even though power chords are pretty common in metal, since they're so well suited for heavy music, power chords do get a bad rap in guitar circles. They're considered easy. To be fair, power chords are using a simplified structure. Again, only a few notes, so only a few fingers. So power chords are easier to visualize and play compared to more intricate fingerings required for full chords. Power chords also typically involve fretting notes, so putting the fingers on spots on the neck of the guitar that are relatively close together on the fretboard, reducing the need for extensive finger stretching. This makes power chords more accessible to beginner guitarists who may not have developed the finger strength or dexterity required for more complex chord shapes. In terms of songwriting, there's also some shade to be thrown at the fact that power chords can be moved up and down the fretboard really easily, allowing guitarists to play them in various positions and keys without having to learn new fingerings for each chord. This versatility makes power chords a useful tool for playing songs in different styles and genres, as well as for improvising and creating original music. Despite being the quote-unquote easy way out, there's no lack of power chords floating around. They just can't be beat in terms of how well they mesh with distortion and overdrive and how superb they are for rhythmic chugging. Because you see, at the end of the day, smart music is great, but great music is just the best. And power chords just make great chugging and great music. Chugging clearly is crucial to creating heavy sound in general, but it's actually responsible for building other pieces of sound. As a building block, chugging creates chunking if done stylistically. Chunking, as a more colloquial term, is sometimes used to describe the chunky percussive sound produced by chugging, particularly when executed with force but also with precision, particularly in its ability to create a dense rhythmic texture within a song. To that end, the terms chugging and chunking are sometimes used interchangeably in guitar circles to describe a similar technique of rhythmic percussive patterns on the guitar. However, there can be some nuanced distinctions between the two depending on the context and interpretation. The term chugging is more commonly associated with heavy rhythmic patterns played on the lower strings of the guitar, often using power chords or single notes to create a pulsating chugging rhythm. On the other hand, some guitarists use the term chunking to describe a more subdued or groove-oriented form of rhythmic playing, where the emphasis is on creating a tight, cohesive groove rather than sheer aggression or intensity. So the difference is subtle but important. Imagine Psychosocial by Slipknot. It uses chugging guitar riffs throughout the song, particularly during the aggressive and dynamic verses. The rhythm guitar plays heavy, palm-muted power chords on the low strings, creating a driving, percussive rhythm that adds to the song's intensity and energy. The chugging patterns in Psychosocial contribute to the song's overall nu metal sound. This example highlights how chugging is a common technique used to create a powerful and rhythmic foundation for the music. Heretic Anthem by Slipknot is another really good example. I'd also say Black Label by Lamb of God would be another prime example of chugging in modern groove metal. The song features aggressive palm-muting guitar riffs throughout, particularly in the main riff and during the intense breakdown sections. The rhythm guitar plays heavy chugging patterns on the low strings, creating a relentless and driving rhythm that fuels the song's intense energy. Lamb of God's use of chugging in Black Label contributes to the song's overall heaviness and drive. These examples demonstrate how chugging is utilized in modern metal to create powerful and rhythmic foundations for the music, enhancing its impact and its intensity. Best way to get your headbang on. Now, if we flip that around and look at chunking, then I direct you to Walk by Pantera, which demonstrates chunking with its distinctive groove-oriented riff. Unlike the relentless speed and aggression of chugging, chunking in Walk involves a slower, more deliberate rhythm, emphasizing that tight, syncopated groove of the main riff. The guitar tone is still all chunky peanut butter thick and heavy, with the rhythm guitar punctuating the groove with muted accents and percussive strumming. This chunking technique contributes to the song's heavy, groove-laden feel, adding depth and texture to the overall sound. Could be chunky almond butter too, doesn't have to be peanut butter. I'm not prejudiced. I'd also point to 5 Minutes Alone and Cowboys from Hell by Pantera. Two other excellent examples of chunking. Another couple of examples of chunking would be Roots Bloody Roots by Sepultura. It has a chunky main riff that drives the song with its heavy groove-laden rhythm. The guitar plays a thick palm-muted riff with accents on the offbeats, creating a powerful rhythmic foundation for the song. The chunking technique in Roots Bloody Roots contributes to the song's aggressive and primal energy. At the risk of sounding like a nu metal fangirl, I'd also suggest Before I Forget by Slipknot, with its chunking in the main riff and throughout the song's dynamic verses. The guitar plays a chunky palm-muted riff with a syncopated rhythm, driving the song with its tight percussive groove. The chunking technique in Before I Forget adds to the song's intense and aggressive vibe, complementing Slipknot's signature blend of metal and aggression. Indestructible by Disturbed has a great lead guitar that plays thick palm-muted power chords with a steady and relentless rhythm too, creating a powerful and rhythmic foundation for the song. Now, no one get feisty. I know. I heard it in my song selection, all right? Don't call this a nu metal thing, because it isn't. At least, not exclusively. Because, see above, Pantera. And don't you dare call Pantera nu metal. Furthermore, I'd offer War Pigs as an example of chunking, particularly in that iconic main riff. I'll also say Love Bites, But So Do I by Hailstorm. They're like metal. So no, I'd fight you if you said chunking was a nu metal technique. It is, however, definitely one technique that gets used a lot in nu metal, considering how important groove and hip-hop-ish bounce is necessary to really get that nu metal vibe. But it's not exclusively a nu metal thing. So, TLDR, there is a difference between chugging and chunking in metal music, and each technique contributes to the overall sound and feel of a song. Chugging emphasizes speed, aggression, and intensity, while chunking focuses on groove, rhythm, and tightness. Both techniques are essential elements of metal guitar playing, contributing to the genre's overall range of sounds and styles. Another technique that is made of chugging, if you would, is galloping. Galloping is a guitar playing technique commonly used in metal music, particularly in subgenres like heavy metal and thrash metal. We'll really try to veer to the heavy metal side for some variety, though. We've really been flogging the thrash metal horse to death. New technique, new pony. Galloping involves playing a series of consecutive downstrokes, so picking only downwards, not stroking the strings back up, in a rhythm that mimics the sound of a galloping horse. Gee, who saw that coming? This technique typically features groups of 3 notes with 2 consecutive downstrokes, followed by a rest or a shorter note value. Were you thinking power chords? Oh, stop Stop it, you naughty thing. But you'd be right, usually power chords. The resulting rhythm creates a fast-paced and energetic feel, adding drive and intensity to the music. Galloping is often used in guitar riffs to create momentum and propel the song forward, contributing to the overall aggression and dynamic of the music. It's a staple technique in the repertoire of many metal guitarists, and it's frequently used in both rhythm and lead guitar parts. Based on that description, you've probably already got Bruce... Oops, I put Brucey in my notes. Ooh, I didn't realize we were in such familiar terms. Oh, Brucey. All right, let's fix that. In your head, after a detailed description of guitar galloping, you're probably already thinking of Bruce Dickinson's voice. Indeed, Run to the Hills and The Trooper are super examples. Judas Priest's Painkiller and Dio's Holy Diver are also classics, but the sound has evolved from the classics and it can be used more dynamically. Through Fire and Flames by Dragon Force gives you this technique, but with a more modern flavor. Going a little darker here, Tyrants by Immortal uses galloping in their verses, creating that delicious black metal anxiety. It doesn't quite bring a Colonial Horse Gone Wild to mind, but it's the same sort of urgency used more stylistically. Basically, galloping, a sub-technique of chugging, is around and doesn't always necessarily bring My Little Pony to mind. So, chugging is itself an important technique and even acts as the building block for other important techniques. Basically, chugging plays a crucial role in shaping the songwriting and composition of metal music, influencing everything from riff construction to overall song structure. In metal, chugging patterns often serve as the foundation upon which entire songs are built, providing a solid rhythmic framework for other instruments to layer upon. Guitarists use chugging to create memorable riffs that serve as hooks and motifs throughout a song, capturing listeners' attention and driving the musical narrative forward. Moreover, chugging is often employed to build tension and intensity within a song, with guitarists utilizing variations in chugging patterns to create contrast and release. By alternating between chugging passages and more melodic or atmospheric sections, metal songwriters can craft songs that ebb and flow dynamically, keeping listeners engaged from start to finish. Chugging also influences the overall structure of metal songs, with many tracks featuring chugging breakdowns or instrumental sections as focal points of intensity. These sections often serve as climactic moments in a song, providing opportunities for guitarists to showcase their technical prowess and musicianship. Overall, the influence of chugging on metal songwriting is profound, shaping the genre's sound and aesthetic in fundamental ways. The technique's influence extends beyond music itself, impacting guitar design and manufacturing. The demand for extended range guitars, so guitars with extra strings, and innovative hardware has surged in response to the growing popularity of chugging-centric playing styles. Guitarists now have access to a wide range of instruments and gear tailored to facilitate the execution of chugging techniques, further propelling its prominence in contemporary music. Achieving the perfect chugging tone in metal requires careful consideration of equipment and gear settings to achieve the desired sound. Guitarists typically opt for guitars with humbucker pickups, so the thick full rectangle pickups, and solid guitar body construction, as these offer the sustain and low-end punch needed for chugging. Additionally, extended range guitars with 7 or 8 strings have become increasingly popular among metal guitarists. And since the extra strings are lower strings, they allow for deeper, more resonant chugging tones. Because again, you get more chugging oomph with lower notes. Amplifiers play a crucial role in shaping the chugging tone, with high-gain amplifiers preferred for their ability to produce thick, saturated distortion, and boost pedals commonly used to push amplifiers into saturation and add more sustain to chugging passages. Additionally, noise gates are essential for controlling unwanted noise and ensuring tight, articulate chugging patterns. You don't want an unmitigated wall of noise. You want the delicious pulsating wave. But that's enough on hardware. Again, how are we back here? Man, I can't seem to behave myself today. Important stuff to mention, though. The influence of metal guitar chugging extends far beyond the realms of metal and rock. Its rhythmic potency and aggressive energy have permeated various musical genres, from punk to pop to electronic music. Artists across the musical spectrum have incorporated chugging patterns into their compositions, whether as a driving force or subtle embellishment. On the punk front, examples would include Holiday by Green Day, which has chugging guitar riffs throughout the song, particularly in the verses and choruses. The guitar plays aggressive, palm-muted power chords with a driving rhythm, creating a sense of urgency and energy that is characteristic of punk rock. They also have Basket Case with its chugging rhythm contributing to the song's catchy and anthemic sound. Sorry, my millennial heart has a soft spot for them, if you hadn't noticed. What can I say? I'm a product of my time. A modern pop song that uses chugging would be High Hopes by Panic at the Disco. I consider them pop. I guess they're like pop rock, punk pop, pop punk, whatever. Radio food. Not dissing. Candy is important in a healthy diet. One cannot live solely off of healthy greens. Something about all work and no play making Jack a dull boy. So, Panic at the Disco, High Hopes, incorporates chugging guitar riffs in the verses and chorus sections. The guitar plays rhythmic palm-muted chords with a catchy and upbeat groove, adding energy and momentum to the song's pop rock sound. A more dance example would be Titanium by David Guetta and Sia. You've probably heard it around. The song utilizes chugging synth patterns in the instrumental sections and throughout the song's powerful chorus. The synths play rhythmic, pulsating patterns with a driving rhythm, contributing to the song's anthemic and uplifting electronic pop production. And yes, I'm adding these to the playlist. I know we all like high-quality, nutritious sustenance in our musical diets, but don't be a dull boy. Eat some candy. Also, it's good to hear the technique in different contexts, just so you can recognize it when you hear it next time in the future at your next normie outing. You know, so that then you can explain to people how metal did it first and better. It's not like I have an agenda here or anything. And that's my closing statement, or at least the gist of it. This simple but effective technique and its associated parts and variations, if you would, is not only critical for what metal has become, but has had reaching consequences on other music genres and even music hardware. So I'm serious, get familiar with it, and next time you hear some chugging on a radio hit, make sure the civilians around you are aware that they're not just eating any kind of pop candy. It's candy corn. It's trying to be a healthy vegetable. A for effort, anyways. And before I sign off entirely, I wanted to just take a second to thank all of you who have been listening, because amazingly, several of you are. I really thought I was going to be screaming into the void for a few weeks or even months. But I can see with the stats on my podcast host that there are several of you foxy demons who keep downloading. There's actually a bunch of you who've been listening, and some of you are even repeat listeners, except the German. I can see stats in some cities, I guess depending on what podcast directory you use, and I can see everyone is American or Canadian, except one German who downloaded the first episode and hasn't been back. And I don't blame them. The first episode was rough, but look, I'm learning. And I just want to thank you so much for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. So although besides vague location information, I don't have much on you and no way to reach out. So do me a favor, hunt me down on the socials and say hey so I can thank you. At this point, it's a matter of political stance that I'm not on the Bird platform. Not that I ever was anyways, but I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Again, that's Genevieve Genepi, so Genevieve. Genepi is Genepi. No, please call me Jen. I'll get to Threads eventually too. Just give me time. But like I said, hunt me down, come say hey, and let me know how you found out about the podcast. Considering how utterly abysmal my social media presence has been thus far. What type of metal are you into? What are you enjoying about the pod so far? What are you into? What are you not into? I sound better when I record in mono, not stereo like the first episode, don't I? You can tell me, I can take it. I heard it too. I'd love to hear from you foxy demons, like I said. So, hunt me down, give me a shout, and until next time, I'm sending you a little love with every riff and rawr.